Wait, can we address that really quick? Because she just said a bunch of nonsense.
No, I know, and I'll find
They
the.
don't-
No, I don't care. You don't need to. You don't have to, because what you're saying is complete nonsense. You're literally doing selective hearing.
Thank you all for being here. Very much appreciated. We are doing the Reverie Roundtable, which we do Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. So, and if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and comment. So I'm going to start by introducing our amazing guests. Thank you, Mr. Fanatic, for coming through at the last minute. It's always great when we do that. But yeah, scheduling is a pain in the ass. Mr. Fanatic, are you?
Yeah, man. I'm glad to be here. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting conversation. I'm interested I'm glad that I get to be on a panel with Kobe. I like him and the way he thinks. We might disagree on some stuff for once, actually. Well, we disagree on a lot of stuff, but maybe it can get cantankerous because it's a panel. We'll see. Who knows?
Thanks so much. Okay. Next, we got. That's weird. All right, sorry. Next, we have Sprouticus. Sprouticus, thank you for coming through. Once again, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm a constitutionalist conservative. Mr. Fanatic, if you're looking for disagreement, we'll probably have a couple. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of that thing. I don't think there'll be a shortage of that here. But I'm excited for this panel. I'm excited to talk to you guys. I love talking to people no matter what your political leanings are, no matter what you believe. I love talking to people because I believe that civil discourse is how we can come together and how we can come to a conclusion, come to a middle ground, and come to a place where we can make America better than what it is right now.
Thanks so much. All right. Next, got a VIP. His name is Counterpoints. Counterpoints, back at it. Thank you for stopping by. Counterpoint. What models are you making right now?
All right, so last week I actually posted it to my Twitter. It's a Blade Guard Ultramarine veteran, and today I'm working on a Sons of the Phoenix Blade Guard veteran. I play Deathwatch, and Sons of the Phoenix are alleged to be. They're supposed to be loyalist. They might actually be from Trader Genestock. So if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, go onto my channel, click on the Warhammer playlist, and then just start watching videos. Because it's all like animations and cartoons and stuff, but I'm like pausing it and giving like lore breakdowns while I'm talking. That's not my intro though. All right, so my intro is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I do react to nerd stuff like science fiction stuff like Warhammer, but I'm also a Marine Corps veteran and a law enforcement veteran, so I also react to war movies like Full Metal Jacket and police movies like End of Watch. I consider myself a centrist or center-right. I think that's probably accurate. I'm super excited about the gun talk. I get to show off my right-wing credentials, so fucking pumped for that shit. And yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Prime. I know that we've had a long relationship at this point. It still warms my heart every time I get an invite on, Saturday or Sunday. So I appreciate you.
Or Monday morning, whatever.
Whatever.
Thank you. And what?
Oh no, I was just gonna say it warms my heart, and yelling at people about politics on the internet is my favorite thing to do. So.
All right. Well, I'm happy to provide. Okay. Next, we have Kara Rana, our former stream queen, back at it. Thank you for being around. Kara Rana, how are you doing today?
I'm doing better. We got to do our Canadian parliamentary, very, very civil, very, very moderated debate today. And we're planning to do a cooking stream so that I can dethrone Kyo-san as the political cook on Twitch.
Okay.
Yeah, we're making Jamaican food next week, so bring your Bob Marley because I'm not playing it.
Sounds good.
Hey, I know a little bit of steel drums. I can try.
I would prefer you do anything but that.
Okay. Next, we have the current stream queen, the person who snatched the crown straight off Katarana's head. Omni, back here. Thank you, Omni. Our first non-progressive stream queen. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I mean, poetically, I would say I am, on average, kind of centrist, a bit libertarian, but I think markets are great. but I also think redistribution is, I think, better than most libertarians do. And so I'm pretty socially liberal. So that's sort of a rough outline of my views about most things. And I have a YouTube channel called Deity Defeater where I mostly talk about religion. Spoiler alert, I'm an atheist.
That rolls. That rolled so hard.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. Okay. All right. Wow, that's a hell of a title. But thanks so much for that. All right. Next we have Kobe, who is in a mod extraordinaire here on this channel. Does a lot for us. Kobe, thank you for joining us. We don't get Kobe too often on the closed panels, but I wish we had him more. Kobe, how you doing?
Well, thank you for having me on. I will, I always love coming on. Love talking about all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of interesting topics. I'm excited to talk to a lot of people here. And I'd like to thank Prime for having me on. But most importantly, of course, I'd like to thank the Chinese Communist Party for being the sort of usher to the Chinese people, to the world, and sort of bringing freedom and liberty everywhere they go. And I want to condemn both the foolishness of John Cena and the foolishness of you, Prime, for even asking the question if Taiwan is part of China. It is obviously part of China. So I'm going to leave. That's all I needed to say. So anyways, no, I'm talking. Thank you for having me.
Damn. Tricking the fuck out of me.
Okay.
Oh, I still want to say something right now.
Oh, man. Thank you, Universal Discourse, for being kind enough to gift 100 bits for counterpoints again. Yes, in honor of counterpoints, give me money. I like that idea. But
do it. Fucking do it.
Next, we have Shadows of Lol. Shadows of Lol. Okay, Shadows of Lol. Shadows, thanks for coming back here.
I'll change it. I'll change it. Okay.
No, leave it whatever you want. I don't know. It's in here. We enjoy having your Shadows back. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I just showered in a new shower that I've never showered in before. I don't have a bedroom right now, so getting ready for stream was a little awkward. But I think this is the first time I've actually been late to one of your panels, so I think I'm pretty proud of myself to say that that's the first. But yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I am Shadows Lightly. You may have seen me 2 weeks ago. I was the guy who was playing piano the whole time, but this week's topics are actually interesting and good, so I won't be doing that today, and I'll be super engaged. But yeah, I am a neoliberal, left-wing neoliberal to be more exact. And I like to talk liberal politics. So if you're interested in watching a younger, low-budget, league-addicted version of Bastion, boy, do I have the link for you, twitch.tv/shadowslightly. We also do some dope music stuff and some gaming. So, yeah.
Thanks for that. And thank you, Alador, for being so kind as to raid. Hope you're having a good day. I hope you have a really good stream. That's really, really kind of you with 32 individuals. Hi to Alador's audience, who I'm guessing none of you know who I am. My name is Prime. We do these political panels. So right now we're literally just about to get started. We do this all the time, 6 days a week. We have a lot of content for you. If political panels like this might interest you, then please give me a follow. We also have open panels where audience members like you, yes, you, may be involved. We'd love to have you. So if anything interests you, anything at all, hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on because I give you a lot of content. Don't you miss out. Thank you, Alador, for being super unbelievably kind as to rate us. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thank you, North Countryman. That name always reminds me of something else. I'll talk about that some other time. But anyway, 202 bits. Thank you so much for that. And then thank you, Universal Discourse, for another 200 bits. It's really, really kind of you. Thank you all for the support. Okay. So, hold on. Looks like we have one last individual here. Hey, hi. Last and best has arrived. Maddie. Maddie, thank you for coming through.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maddie Cakes. I am a political activist / organizer with a background in digital marketing. and I stream all the time here on Twitch. I also post a lot on Twitter, so I'm probably most active there. But I am a frequent face in panels like these where we talk about all these very important issues and sometimes have great discussions. So can't wait for that.
Okay. All right, so let's just jump into it. Topic 1. A judge repealed California's 3 decades old ban on assault weapons and ruled it to be unconstitutional. The California AG argued that the weapons were more dangerous and used in a disproportionate amount of mass shootings. The judge disagreed and said that the guns were overwhelmingly used for legal purposes, and law-abiding citizens were being deprived of weapons that are legal in most states. The judge is correct to say most of these weapons aren't used for crime. But if we follow his reasoning, does that mean most firearm regulations are unconstitutional because they will in some way deprive a law-abiding citizen of their legally operated weapons? Isn't it worth restricting this right in the interest of public safety? And credit to our good friend Counterpoints for being so kind as to bring this up. All right. We'll start with Fanatic. 1 minute introduction.
Wow. Okay. Being from California, I mean, I feel like I've never been a big fan of our gun laws. I feel like we go a little bit ham unnecessarily. But overall, I think, I think it's true that the vast majority of these guns aren't used in that purpose. If we were really trying to save lives, it would make more sense for us to do something like ban handguns, which of course no one's in favor of. I think I'm in favor of them removing this restriction, and I think we should probably focus more on things like mental health and things like that in order to deal with a mass shooting problem. Because banning assault weapons is just stupid.
Hey, thanks so much. And thank you, Gilly Theory, for gifting another 200 bits. We have a hype train started. If people could help out the hype train, that'd be awful kind of you. 4.5 minutes up on the clock, but thank you so much for the donations. Okay, next, Sprout.
So yes, I think that we should have assault rifles, or whatever you're gonna call them, assault weapons. AR does not stand for assault rifle, but we'll go into that a different time. It's Armalite rifle. But I think that they should be legalized in all 50 states. I'm 100% for the abolishment of the National Firearms Act. I think the National Firearms Act is an abridgment of the Second Amendment. Because if you actually look at, like Mr. Fanatic said, if you actually look at the crimes that are committed, they are more often committed to handguns than they are with rifles. This is common among all crimes. And so with that being said, I am 100% for what the judge said, and I don't think with that being said, I don't think it's a public interest to ban these weapons for the sake of public safety, considering these weapons aren't used and handguns are used.
Okay. And thank you, Universal Discourse, for being so incredibly kind. Gifting, what was it? 5 hot tier 1 gift subs to the channel. Yes, thank you. And thank you, Canada Dark, for gifting 199 bits, and I think Universal for another 200 bits. That's really, really kind. We're at level 2 hype train. If you could help us out, 1.5 minutes up on the clock. Please help out the hype train. Keep this channel sustainable. Thanks so much. Counterpoints.
Yeah, so I think Californians and I believe the state of Hawaii and a few other states are responsible for legislating for the bench. I'm expecting a concealed weapons permit victory on the way, not just the assault weapons ban victory for the gun rights advocates, because there are counties in California and New York that are may issue states, and basically they arbitrarily decide who gets to have a concealed weapons permit. So the only people who actually have the right to keep and bear arms in some of these counties are people who are rich or connected. So I see these contestations making it up to the Supreme Court. I see another good ruling coming down. I think there's plenty of things that we can do in order to end mass shootings. I think putting armed security or law enforcement in soft targets is a good idea. 1 per 500, 1 per 1,000. I think mandating these for public, or that kind of standard for public facilities, is a good idea. I think universal health care is a good idea. I think universal mental health care is a good idea. I think taking care of our sick and our mentally ill and our mentally disordered folks is a good way to reduce mass shootings. And I think from a leftist perspective, I would be more interested in solving the material conditions than taking away people's rights. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm happy to get into details in the general. Looking forward to it.
This sucks. Me and Kobe don't disagree. I want to disagree
Yeah,
with him on
so
something.
like
I like the way he
just
thinks.
off of
Maybe
pure
maybe
emotional
change my brain.
reasons, I don't like the appeal of it. But when I went ahead and looked further into it, I saw that the year after this ban went into place, there was actually an increase in the amount of murders that were committed. So I can't really see how this like legislation really did anything necessarily effective. Like likewise, if we want to say that, hey, ARs happen to, kill a lot of people. Basically, every single weapon could go ahead and be attributed to killing people. So statistically, I will have to say that the appealing of this law, I feel like will probably cause like a spike just because suddenly they're available. Just like everything does whenever something's appealed, but then it would probably get normalized again. But just pure emotional reasons, I don't like the appeal, but yeah, I can't really support that, so I have to support the other end.
Thanks so much. 2 minutes left on the hype train. If anyone else helps out, be awfully appreciative. All right, next, Omni.
I mean, I think that the issue is that we have these sort of vague rules that determine in what cases judges should make judgment calls about which guns people have the right to have. And I think that sort of given the difficulty of determining what guns people should have or not, I think a better solution would be one that was proposed in a law article. I'm forgetting the name of the author. But the solution was setting up a liability scheme where if a gun seller sells a gun to someone and they use it to harm people, then the gun seller can be held financially accountable. So similarly to how with pollution, I think a good solution is to tax the harms caused by it. I think that we should tax the harms caused by people supplying guns to other people. And then then you would expect sellers to take adequate gun safety precautions because they have a financial incentive too. And as the article pointed out, it would not involve infringing upon the Second Amendment because it would just be restricting the setting up a liability scheme, which doesn't violate your right to own a gun. If we set up a liability scheme for if the gun that you sell to someone is used to harm people.
Lord, I hope Inside's not in here
Thank you.
now.
All right, Kobe.
For sure. So I think that gun control is a little bit more of a contentious topic than it needs to be, but I understand why it is, because you have a lot of people like our Beta O'Rourke's that throw it out of proportion and make the conversation very difficult. I'm assembling my facts here, but it looks like a vast majority of Americans support, like, I don't like the term common sense, but common sense gun control. Stuff like, laws encouraging safety, talking about taxes and fines. That's what I think laws encouraging, or safety. Obviously, laws encouraging safety. But yeah, that's a good idea. Laws encouraging safe gun storage. Laws concerning stuff that we've talked about here. Not letting people with violent crimes get them, et cetera, et cetera. I think that these are pretty reasonable, and we should try to approach them. I don't know; they seem reasonable. In specifically in California's case, I agree with Fanatic. California has like a legitimately like very like honestly kind of an emotional response, like emotional legislation, in which like we just don't like guns, we don't like big guns, and we pass a lot of really stupid things. Everybody knows about like the famous California AR-15 stocks that like make it harder to shoot and stuff, or make it hard to put a bump stock on or something. I don't know. It seems all very silly. I agree that we need to try to get a little bit more fact based into this. But hey, maybe we should fund federal gun research a little bit more. That'd be pretty based. But as Counterpoint said, we can get into the details in the open.
Shadows.
Okay, so yeah, I think I'm very consistent. I'd like to think so when I call myself a civil libertarian. So I am very pro-gun, and I have a very strong stance on this. I know I'm going to enjoy talking about this with Sprouticus, because there are certain clauses in it. And I think the regulation clause, I think a total ban on just assault weapons is totally an overstep. California totally oversteps it. If we want to talk about banning certain things, I think certain magazines would be a better topic. I think extended magazines, like a 50-round magazine or a drum magazine for ARs, I think that's fine banning. I think California's a little too restrictive on its, magazines when it comes to handguns, but we can get into that, and also, the other more nuanced stuff. But I think generally speaking, you should not just ban, entire class of guns. If California wants to put a little bit of red tape around it, I understand that. But otherwise, I think just outright banning it is totally unconstitutional, and I very much agree with the judge.
Addie.
Whew, well, we just heard 7 people who are like, yeah, this is totally fine. We should have some more AR-15s and guns. So I am just so excited to see how this goes, because I tend to be on the side of more gun control, especially when it pertains to assault weapons. And a little bit of history on this particular judge. So he's a judge based out of San Diego. He was appointed by George W. Bush in 2004. And this isn't the first time that he's ruled somewhat controversially on gun legislation. So not that long ago, he also, let me pull this up to make sure I quote it correctly, but he also had previously ruled that California's ban on high capacity magazines was unconstitutional. That lasted for 72 hours before it was reinstated. And then he also tried to strike down the restriction on remote purchases of gun ammunition. So there's a few different things that this judge has done. This is also something that has been worked on in tandem by a specific gun rights groups based out of San Diego County. So this isn't new. And if you live in California, you know that San Diego in particular is a very sort of purple area, reddish area. So you see a bit of Republican influence there on gun legislation. I tend to agree with banning assault weapons, especially here in California as a Californian. I just don't see any reasonable explanation for why someone would need an AR-15. The notion that it would somehow be for self-protection is absurd, especially when you consider that a lot of these guns can shoot through multiple layers of drywall. So to say that if someone breaks into your home and you're going to somehow defend your home, your property with an AR-15, when that could very well not only injure someone else in your family, but shoot through walls into the neighbor's house. I just don't see that as a possibility. And the data backs that up, where they are rarely used for instances of self-defense. I also really don't see the need for using them. No one's going to use them if you're hunting. I think the only reasonable explanation that I've heard for owning and using an AR-15 is for people in Texas who go on those dope helicopter, shooting feral hogs tours that you can do. I think that is a very reasonable use for an AR-15 type gun. But again, you want to do that, go to Texas. And for those who are well, any of this is unconstitutional, I thought you liked states' rights. So where do states' rights end? That's all I have to say.
Maybe
And
when they compromise the
I say good luck to myself, because I think I'm the only one who is okay with this ban.
Colorado might be with you, but I see counterpoints. As always, the love affair between Maddie and counterpoints grows. So counterpoints, go ahead and declare your emotions once again.
No, I'll go gentle or easy in the beginning. So basically,
In the beginning, it's
yeah, you gotta go slow, right? In the beginning. So, anyways, I'm sure my wife would love that. Anyways, so what's the reason for owning an AR-15? I think we really need to get back to fundamental moral axioms and see whether or not we agree with them anymore. So the Second Amendment is not about self-defense. The Second Amendment, unless you consider your self-defense against the state, it's not for hunting. It's not for any of that stuff. It's very specifically for the ability of the civilian populace to be able to resist a potentially tyrannical government. And there's the Federalist Papers, there's a Second Amendment, there's a whole bunch of founding father philosophy that basically says that governments are of, for, and by the people, and that the way to maintain this balance of power is by making sure that you have a armed populace. Justice Antonin Scalia basically came out and said that this is not an unlimited right. He doesn't want people to have nukes. He doesn't want people to have belt feds. Maybe Sprouticus and I will kind of, separate on this a little bit. But basically, the question is, where do we draw the line at where Americans could successfully resist the government? Whenever I get into, I'll try to make this brief. I know other people want to talk. I think that the American populace, if we had 19th century technology, literally like lever action cowboy guns and single action revolvers, 76 million people could still take on the federal government with 19th century technology. So then the question is, where do we draw the line? How do we balance public safety? I still want ARs and AKs to be legal because I think functionally they're similar enough to other platforms that they're not that much larger of a threat. And on top of that, you know what? I'm just going to leave it there. I have like 10 other fucking tangents and I'm just not going to stop talking. So I'm going to leave it there.
All right. I will go to Sprout, Omni, Shadows, and Katarana.
All right. If you look at the Second Amendment was not designed just solely for self-defense. As Counterpoints brilliantly pointed out, the Second Amendment was designed for the citizens to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. That is the way it was designed. You can read the Federalist Papers. You can find that out. With that being said, the AR-15 platform is not an M4 platform. Those are two different platforms. They are designed to look similar. They do not act in the same way. With that also being said, you brought up assault weapons. So if I hit someone with a bat, it now becomes an assault bat. If I put a staple into someone, guess what? That's now an assault stapler. Okay, assault is an action. It is not to define something. Assault is an action. If I take my pistol, it's now an assault pistol because I used it to assault. Okay, so it's not an assault weapon. It is an AR-15, which stands for Armalite Rifle. What? I don't know what somebody said, but okay. It is an Armalite rifle, okay? And so this is designed to keep us safer by tyrannical government. And as you've seen, when guns get taken away, governments slowly become more tyrannical. You can see that throughout history. But continue. I'll yield time.
Okay. Omni, Sprout, Katarana.
So I think that the sort of wait. Can people hear me? Okay, yeah. I think that the divisions about the specifics of which guns have benefits that outweigh the costs, given that we all agree that there are some weapons that can be regulated, we think people should not be able to have nukes. I think that almost all of us can be in agreement that the set of weapons that the government has chosen to restrict or prohibit is wrong in some way. So liberals will think, we don't ban enough guns. Conservatives will think that we ban too many guns. I think that the solution is that sort of could be a bipartisan solution is you let people have pretty expansive access to guns, but you require the manufacturer, if a gun is used to harm people, you require the manufacturer to pay. So the manufacturer would have an incentive to engage in sort of a privatized form of gun control to minimize the risk that the weapon would be used to harm people. So they would have an incentive to do effective background checks because they know that they would pay a fiscal cost. In terms of the point about resisting government tyranny, I don't think that this is... I think that it's true etymologically that this is a major reason for why the Second Amendment arose in the first place. But I don't think that I don't think that it is as especially relevant today, except for constitutional considerations. I mean, obviously we have to consider the Constitution, but just as a practical matter of whether the policies will have more harms than benefits. I think it's relevant today, given that according to research I've seen by people like Chenoweth, generally it is violent revolutions that are more likely to result in large amounts of backlash, large amounts of killing and violence, and are actually significantly less likely than nonviolent revolutions to achieve the aim of the revolution. And particularly with very advanced military technology, I think that it is unlikely that a revolution would be able to be successful if it occurred in the 21st century. And it's equally likely that you could have a revolution where people sort of fight the government in ways that are harmful.
Sprout or Counterpoint, you have a direct response to Omni?
Yeah, I do.
Counterpoints go first.
Yeah, sorry, I can be fairly brief. The reason why I wouldn't, as a person who's pro-gun, would never accept manufacturer responsibility or even seller like responsibility or whatever. Like, I'm okay. Like, if they're selling to somebody who doesn't pass a background check, that's okay. But if you're talking about selling to somebody who passes a background check and then they harm or hurt or kill somebody else, then no. The answer is fundamentally no. That's fucking silly. Nobody's psychic. You don't sell car, like you don't do a background check on car drivers who have fucking who don't have DUIs and then hold car manufacturers responsible for people who then go do DUIs and hurt or kill somebody. That's way too high of a bar. It's not feasible. It's not relevant. It's not possible. Resisting government is not a relevant issue today. This would be my argument is like, okay, so we've been fighting dudes in flip-flops with AK-47s and 2 mags shoved up their butts for like 20 years now. The ability to resist on a military level is not exclusively for like a military victory. Clausewitz said that war is diplomacy by other means. You can influence policy through violence. And there are some examples throughout history of governments that are nefarious enough that you should be able to resist them through violence. I would cite the CCP in the modern day. I would cite the Khmer Rouge. I would cite Nazi Germany. I would cite all of these as examples that even if the government was going to kill the shit out of you, violent resistance would still be the way to go. Finally, revolution won't be successful. Nonviolent revolution is better. Listen, I've had this conversation with Socialism Done Left, and it was basically like a meta-analysis of revolutions throughout history. And he was like, well, a nonviolent revolution has a 40% chance of successful, and a violent revolution has a 25% chance of success. Those things are like looking at like a mono variable and then just like applying it and like extrapolating it out to the real world. The truth is, whether or not you're capable of having a peaceful revolution or a violent revolution is very much relevant to the material conditions that leftists love. So I'm just going to cite that to you and yield the floor.
Route direct response.
So direct response to Omni. Having a manufacturer responsibility for weapons or for pistols, rifles, whatever you want to call them, it's irresponsible, because what's going to happen is that the weapon manufacturer is no longer going to be able to own their business, because they're going to be so scared of whatever someone may do 20 years later with their rifle that they sold in 20 years prior, that they're just not going to want to sell to anybody. You would essentially be banning guns through private industries. The industries wouldn't be able to survive because just that fear. And not only that, if you're going to talk about guns having a basically a liability, are we going to talk about other things having a liability? If you buy a car and you get a DUI, that car manufacturer is now liable for the DUI. If you buy a Louisville Slugger and hit someone over the head with it, that Louisville Slugger is now responsible for the hospital bills that you caused by hitting them over the head with the Louisville Slugger. Like, how far are you willing to go with this ideology before you go, okay, maybe it's not the best one?
Okay. We're going to move down the list, but before I'll give Omni a chance to respond, and then we'll move down that list. So we'll go to after Omni will be Shadows, Katarana, Fnatic, Kobe, Maddie. We got plenty of time, so we'll get to everybody.
Yeah, so in terms of what Counterpoint said about why, how we would not hold car manufacturers liable, the reason is because the problem of how to best avoid car accidents is generally a relatively simple problem. But the problem of how many guns people should have, such that the benefits of the marginal benefit of a gun outweighs the cost, is a very difficult problem. And it seems like when the government tries to figure out top-down exactly what guns people should have, it fails miserably. So requiring people to internalize harms would solve the problem. In terms of the claim about how this was from Spartacus, about how this would be about how this would be a de facto ban because people would never sell guns. There are two parts of the scheme that I forgot to mention that I think would make this not a problem. One is that if you use a gun and you use it in a way that helps that saves civilians or stops a crime directly, then the manufacturer of the gun would get a financial reward. So they internalize both the costs and the benefits. And second is that they would be required to have a means of payment beforehand. So you would expect insurance schemes to be set up beforehand that would sort of cover the cost if the gun manufacturers sell it. But then they would, in order to remain profitable, they would impose certain requirements. So you get this, I think, more efficient privatized scheme, which works better than a top-down system. The last point about how revolutions should use violence. I mean, the Chenoweth study was comparative. It said specifically that if revolutionaries use violence relative to in cases where they don't use violence, generally, if they use violence, things go better. And so it wasn't just looking at correlation. It was actually looking at causation in terms of specific examples of revolutions. So, for example, with like nonviolent protests recently over the summer, they generally resulted in the things they were protesting for being far more likely to pass. But violent revolutions helped the people who were opposed to protest. I think the historical record is clear that attempting to resist the government with guns is not a very effective strategy. And even if there are isolated instances of it working, it's not as effective as alternatives.
Okay, so we'll go to Shadows, Katarana, Fnatic, Kobe, and Maddie. But do me one favor before Omni. Like, one, mute yourself. But two, like, when you're talking, try to like lift your mic, because you got a mic on your lapel thing, and it like rubs against your shirt, and then we all hear it. So just like give you something, and then when you're talking, just like lift it up or something, because that'll be very helpful. Thank you so much. All right, let's go to Shadows.
Yeah, so when it comes to the idea of holding manufacturers accountable, I think Omni's argument is probably better than the more common one, which I hear, which is that, it'll, cause safer guns, and it will, make, guns that require biometric unlocking to be more likely. The thing is, the cheapest gun on the market that requires a finger ID, last time I checked, was about $1,300 or $1,400. So yeah, those are not going to become cheaper anytime soon. The best way we can do that is with R&D, and just over time it will become cheaper. I think I think putting money towards R&D, especially at universities, is a good idea. But when it comes to the main thing I wanted to respond to initially was the self-defense argument, and the idea that the Second Amendment was not created for self-defense. While this is true, I think it is actually the most important reason to have it. Because the thing is, self-defense, the right to self-defense, is a human right. And that is why most conservatives will call the Second Amendment a, quote, God-given right. Because even if you don't believe in God, we would just call that a human right. And you have a human right to self-defense. That is not something that can be deprived from you. Even if people pin you down, you are going to try and wiggle and squeal your way out of it because you want to defend yourself. You have that innate reaction to fight back. So I think that's the most important reason why we can have the Second Amendment, is for self-defense, and defend, if your defense or the defense of people you love, like your family, is in jeopardy. I think that is the most important reason, or the best reason to have a gun. So yeah, I yield.
Aruna.
Yeah, so it's been a while, but as for Maddie earlier, I instinctively am not really a big fan of the appeal here, but I'm thinking perhaps there's just a chance that this legislation in particular just wasn't the most effective way of going about and doing gun control, and perhaps just based off of the stats, it didn't seem like anything significant came out of the move to go ahead and ban it. So I would say that I'm okay with the appeal here because it wasn't as successful as people wanted it to be. And also when it comes to assault weapons, I don't like them either. But also I can go ahead and prescribe the idea that what is the utility of this to like a lot of things that people happen to own. I don't think there's a utility in the majority of things that people decide to go ahead and collect. There's no reason to be for someone to own an AR, but there's also no reason to be for anyone to own like a sports car. So at the same time, I think hopefully with this being appealed, there could be some form of new legislation that's brought forward that does maybe a bit more analysis that will bring about some type of gun control that is more effective than this was.
Okay. So these goddamn liberals are coming for our sports cars. What's next? Our trophy wives? It's
Yes.
unbelievable. So let's go to well, I know someone's coming for our trophy wives. Fanatic, hey, how are you doing, buddy?
Listen,
So
I was gonna say you don't need liberals for that. Like you got, you know, what I'm saying young black men like myself that is definitely coming for people's trophy wives. Specifically those. No, let's stop. Anyway, yeah. So someone made a statement that I just felt like needed to be addressed. I can't remember who it was. I think it was the Sprouticus. Like you kind of played fast and loose with definitions when you were like defining what an assault rifle is, right? Like, because while yes, like a weapon that does an assault is not what we're talking about when we're talking about assault rifles. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. Like we know what an assault rifle is, and that's not like just any weapon that is used for assault is not considered an assault rifle, or any rifle that's used for assault is not considered an assault rifle. That's not what that is. But then someone else said something that was equally ridiculous, and they made the statement that car accidents are an easy problem to fix, whereas gun violence isn't, and that's just patently not true. So, like in California, we have significantly less gun deaths per year than we do have car accidents. So it's clearly not something that's easy to fix. And of the gun deaths that we have per year, which is around 1,700, over 50% of those things are suicides. Which is not an easy thing to fix and not an easy thing to control for. A lot of times those things like come on really rapidly, and it's really hard to even know that it's coming. So yeah, I just think that's just not true at all. I'm going to say ultimately, I think the whole idea about a usurpacious government and that being like part of the drive behind why we need guns, I think it still holds up. And while I recognize that like the government has access to nukes and things like that, the government can't realistically use those things if they were trying to do something like usurpacious, because at the end of the day, like they would end up hitting so many citizens, right? Like they couldn't confront that in a meaningful, safe way, in a controlled way. And I think that it's a big enough discouragement to prevent it. Arming citizens is not because we would have the ability to win a conflict with trained military. It's about, it would create such a barrier, such an inhibitor in like them being able to completely just subvert people's will, that it eventually would become like something where it's like, yeah, we kind of got to go in a different direction. Like we have to be a little bit more considerate in the way that we're considering, you know, overcoming the people or whatever. So I think, yeah, they're incredibly useful in just that alone. And I think ultimately, if you believe in the Constitution, you kind of have to hold on to that, because that's literally the reason why it was created. And again, if we're looking at violence, right? Like, I don't even think the onus should be on us to be the ones determining. Like we have to come up with a reason for why we need them. You have to come up with a reason for why we should ban them. And considering any reason that you give me for why those should be banned could probably be better placed on handguns, I don't know how you could ever come up with an argument for why we should be getting rid of them.
Okay. I will go to Kobe, Maddie, Sprout, counter on.
I was addressed. Can I?
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm being attacked for well, I guess I'm being came after for using the definition assault, right? I'm calling it assault bats or assault staplers, which it would be ridiculous to a lot of people in chat, right? Saying, oh, it's an assault stapler because someone used it to assault somebody. I used it to prove a point, which wasn't counteracted by Mr. Fanatic or Matty Cakes, is that they don't have a definition for assault weapon. They have a very loose definition, but they don't have a defined definition of what's an assault weapon and what isn't an assault weapon.
Assault rifle.
They just pick and choose what they want. An AR-15 is extremely similar to other Hind rifles that they don't talk about. And so the AR-15 can actually be used as a Hind rifle to counter what Matty Cake said. There's a round called a 300 Blackout that is commonly used for hunting. So I'll yield there.
I don't think he's listening.
We'll get Kobe, Maddie, counter on.
For sure. So, for one thing, I sympathize with Maddie wanting to point out the hypocrisy of states' rights stuff. Conservatives are very frustrating to argue with, but I would say in the realm of gun control, I actually think that having gun control that overrides states' rights is good, because having like Nevada having loose gun rights and then coming into California, that causes a problem, you know. But that's like a minor thing. I spit on the Constitution. I'm joking. But the Constitution was written a bajillion years ago. I don't really care what the exact definition of it is. We should update it. The original Constitution said that black people weren't people and that women weren't
Didn't.
shouldn't vote and whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't care. I'm sorry. Taxi gun manufacturers. I already talked about that. I don't really understand that, and so I don't really care. I don't like the guns and cars comparison because both are very dangerous, and we regulate cars like an insane amount. Right, like there are tons of cars that are not street legal. There's tons of certifications. We like have registration. There's you have to pay. I mean, I just said that I have to pay my car registration now. Like it sucks. And then so yeah, the right to self defense. I don't know. I don't really want to talk about this because I feel like it feels kind of cringe because it's like the idea that like, well, you have right to self-defense, so you have the right to a specific commodity. Seems kind of like a logical leap there. Do I have right to a nuclear weapon? I don't know. But I want to ask to the people that are pro the idea that it is possible for it ever for us to overthrow the government through armed force. Is there an example in like modern history, so we'll say post World War II, of an industrialized country, like an industrialized liberal democracy like us, that successfully had a violent revolution? I can't think of any. I really can't. Like it seems all the revolutions post World War II have been in either colonial states or dictatorial states. But I'd wonder what the examples would be from people on the panel.
Next, Maddie counter Almond.
Oh no! I thought you weren't listening.
A few points I wanted to make here. First, to Sprouticus about, well, what is an assault weapon? Like, if I use a stapler, that's an assault stapler, whatever. Look. We're all adults here having an adult conversation, right? In this context, we are referring to the legal definition as outlined in that law's text because that's what was repealed. So when you write legislation, what you have to do, or any contract for that matter, you have to establish definitions of terms in the initial part or opening section of that legislation. So what I'm going to do, because I was looking at the actual bill text, I can link you to it so you can check out how they define assault weapons. Because you know what, you're right. Like when we're just talking about it in everyday discussions or in the medias, I think it refers to a number of different things. People can have, say, assault rifle or assault weapon and mean a lot of different things. In this specific context, we are referring to the legal definition and what is outlined in this specific bill, because that is what is being discussed. So, you know, I know maybe you were confused about like, well, what are we talking about? Assault weapon, like anything's an assault weapon. No, like lawyers would disagree. And there is a specific definition of what constitutes an assault weapon. I would read it, but like there are a lot of people that want to talk, so I won't waste your time, but I will link you to it.
I mean, I love the ad hominem attacks. So
yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Anyways, so also I think, you know, there's people saying, oh, but I need it to protect me from a tyrannical government. Because listen, like I fundamentally do agree that there needs to be, like, I want citizens to feel empowered against their government. I don't want to cultivate a society where people feel like there's nothing they can do and that they are at risk of being, you know, oppressed or taking over or have the government sort of suppress their rights. I agree. But what is a more real and relevant threat to my life and health and well-being right now in this moment, and I would probably say the same for everyone, is not a tyrannical government looking to knock down my door and murder me. It's people being able to own guns that have a huge capacity to murder or maim as many people as possible, as quickly and efficiently as possible. Just down the street from where I grew up in San Jose, recently, a gunman murdered, I think it was, I forget what the final death count was, but a number of people that work for our public transit system here. When I worked at Google, in the same building that I was in that day, a gunman came on campus and shot someone. I remember having to evacuate and watch as all the sirens came in, not knowing what was happening. It was fucking terrifying. And I don't know, like, that's the thing. It's like the bigger threat to my livelihood, to my life and well-being, and to the bigger threat to my family and friends, the people I love, is not a tyrannical government. It's people having easy access to guns and guns of war. And that's I don't know. That's why it's hard for me to say, oh, but, we have to weigh how important it is to be able to stand up and protect yourself from a tyrannical government. Because I'm like, that's not who I'm worried about protecting myself from right now.
Great. So then that means you want to get
I'm not done.
Too.
I'm not done. But then I'll welcome rebuttals and other points that you guys want to talk about. And then also just the last point I want to make is that, for victims of gun violence, like, oh, well, should they be able to sue gun manufacturers, and why, but if you get hit by a car, you can't sue Ford. And I think an important distinction there to be made is that cars aren't specifically designed to kill or murder people, whereas guns are specifically designed to kill or maim people, like whether it's people, whether it's an animal, whatever, but they are specifically designed to kill and maim as efficiently and quickly as possible. So I don't think it's unreasonable I don't know if that should amount necessarily to suing gun manufacturers. I think that's like a different conversation to be had, but that's why I think they reasonably should be treated differently than something like a car.
Fanatic, if you want to directly address Maddie,
I know.
Then we'll go to counter Omni and Shadows.
I mean, she just said so
And
much.
Sprout.
I literally don't even remember the point. I should have taken notes down. It was. I can't remember. Did anyone remember what I interjected with? Because it was stupid.
What did I say that was stupid? No, I think I was talking about owning a gun and protecting oneself against tyrannical government.
There you go. I got you. So the thing you were saying about like, I think the thing that I should be more concerned with is like, like that this constitutes like a better threat, such that I should be more concerned with it, like people having access to weapons and things like that. But with that line of logic, then that means you would be okay with them completely getting rid of handguns, right? And you should be more concerned with getting rid of handguns than you should with assault weapons, right?
So I feel different. So here's the thing, like, because I recognize in a perfect ideal world, I would prefer to live in a society without guns. However, I know that's not realistic. I know that's not realistic in this country. And the difference between something like an AR-15 and a handgun is that, like, handguns are actually, like, if someone is going to successfully, like, defend themselves from an intruder or someone attacking them, they are more likely to successfully protect themselves if they're armed with a handgun than they are with an AR-15, because AR-15 simply aren't used for like self-defense, that sort of thing. No. I guess in my mind, I see the value more in a handgun than I do. And handguns can't kill as many people as quickly as something like an AR-15.
Sure. Like, but the argument is not whether or not something can. It's about what happens. And in this country, I think it's reasonable to say that it just so happens to be that in this country, handguns kill significantly more people. So if the argument that you're going to use to defend getting rid of handguns is going to be something like it's going to be like for safety, then you have to be consistent, and then that means that you have to. If your argument for getting rid of those other weapons is safety driven, then that means you have to be in favor of getting rid of handguns. Other than that, then you're literally logically inconsistent, right?
I would love to, truly, but again, like, I know that just politically feasible, like the feasibility of like saying we need to get rid of handguns, I don't think that's just politically feasible right now. I personally would love to. So I think maybe that's why, if we want to talk about like, oh, well, is it like logically inconsistent? Potentially, but I also kind of factor in the plausibility of actually putting through legislation to enact these changes. And I just don't see anything like a handgun ban being feasible in this current political climate. So one way to essentially do some form of harm reduction would be to remove a weapon that is responsible for a number of these mass shootings, where I don't know that there is much utility for owning those weapons beyond being able to say they're cool. But I get you. Like, it admittedly isn't like...
Yeah. So I mean, if we're really going to get down to the heart of it, right? Like, I mean, someone mentioned that the San Jose shooter like had 3 semi-automatic handguns, right? Like that's what that recent event was about. He used handguns there. So you should be literally arguing for for getting rid of handguns. And since we know, since like the weapons, assault rifles, are like super duper minority. Like the idea is like, it boggles my mind that we put energy forward towards getting rid of those things when we know what the actual threat is. It'd be like finding out that people are using arsenic to poison, I don't know, large amounts of people, and then we're deciding, yeah, I get that, but anthrax has so much more lethal potential. Let's focus energy towards anthrax. It's just ridiculous. Like, focus where the actual energy is. But now we know what the actual energy is. The actual energy is you want to get rid of handguns, but you just can't do it because it's not politically viable, because everyone recognizes how important guns are for self-defense. Everyone recognizes how important it's literally part of the Second Amendment right. And once you get rid of handguns, it seems like it gets a little bit absurd. So yeah, I mean, as long as you're willing to admit that it's logically untenable, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't think there's really much more to
Yeah.
So
No, but let me just respond really quickly. But yeah, so my whole thing isn't that like it's politically untenable because people recognize the value of self-protection using handguns. It's because that gun culture and the Second Amendment, all this, and the notion, and that because handguns are so much more popular and owned than something like an assault rifle, assault weapon, whatever. That is why it's politically untenable. But I get it. Like, I think, I'm the first to admit when maybe one of my arguments isn't like the most consistent because I have nuance in how I approach some of these things. Would I love to get rid of handguns too? Because you're right. Like, by following that logic, we should, because handguns are used for all of those those shootings. Hell yeah, I would love to get rid of them because I don't think they make people safer. I don't think they're a useful tool for self-protection. However, I recognize that the vast majority of Americans don't agree with that. The vast majority of Americans very much value their ability to own a handgun. So I figure, I'd rather look for middle ground and areas where I can reduce harm and make the country safer by making some sort of compromise. And that
Okay.
to me is where I saw the compromise.
So we're going to counter Omni, Shadow, Sprout, Kobe, Karan.
Yeah. So what this boils down to, because we keep hitting surface level stuff that I'm going to get into in a second. But basically, this boils down to a fundamental axiomatic belief. Do you think that people have the right to resist and destroy their own government with force, with weapons, or do you not? There's plenty of examples of governments throughout history that have said that that's not a thing. The UK, the Commonwealth. There's all sorts of countries that basically say that no, you don't have basically this unfettered right to destroy the government. And not all of them are nightmare dystopias. Depends on your definition of nightmare dystopia. They're nightmare dystopias to me, but I'm sure we're nightmare dystopias to them. So instead of going down to fundamental axiomatic beliefs, let's hit some of the surface stuff that you guys talked about. So basically, Kobe brought up hey, are there any examples of industrialized countries that have had successful violent revolutions since World War II? That's kind of a weird that they have to be industrialized in order for political balance of power to be important. So for instance, if you think that Vietnam was a decolonized state and not an industrialized state, you can actually say that the war in Vietnam was actually won by dudes in sandals with assault rifles, because that's what a majority of the fighting was basically militias that eroded the political will of the military. The reason why I bring that up is because I was literally talking about the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was actually a military and strategic and tactical disaster for North Vietnamese forces, but it was a political victory. It actually helped cement the United States' withdrawal through Vietnam. So I would see that as a successful revolution by dudes in sandals with AKs. We need to update the Constitution. It was written a million years ago. There's the problem that I have with this mentality. What really frustrates me about people who are oh, those are just a bunch of old slave owners, we shouldn't listen to what they say. Marcus Aurelius was the fucking emperor of Rome. He said shit that's incredibly relevant, and he lived fucking 1900 years ago. If a problem and the solution to that problem are articulated by an intelligent person who lived 1900 years ago, it doesn't matter if the problem and the solution to that problem still exist. Time is not a factor. The question is, what is the problem and what is the solution to that problem, and does that still apply today? And specifically when it comes to balance of power politics and conflict in general, I think the founding fathers are exactly on point. So examples of industrialized countries, again, maybe the Soviet states would be a better example, in which factions of the military went with militias and then had successful revolutions, but they had to have access to military grade weaponry in order to have successful revolutions against Soviet states. I have like 10 other points, but I don't want to monopolize all of the time. So I'll yield there, and then if you could just add me back to the list, I'd be very appreciative.
Could I please respond? Could I respond really quickly?
Sure.
Okay, so I have 3 quick responses. First one is, just because an old figure has a good idea doesn't necessarily mean that they have all the vital information. I know that you would agree with this. Like Socrates believed that blood was pushed through the body by spirits, right? Like you can have. I feel like it's not a good idea to bring up like the founding fathers because they have some good ideas. I would agree in general, but like we're talking about specific policy. I don't know if that's relevant. The second one is whether or not the country was industrialized is important to me because we're crafting policy for an industrialized country. We're not talking about Vietnam, which was a colonized state, which is we can talk about that for very, very complicated for a long time, but that I think that factors in to the how much of a series how much of a infrastructure you have to actually destroy to fight a government in a colonized state versus industrialized state. And lastly, do you have the right to overthrow a government, and do you have the right to overthrow the government with a specific commodity or 2 different arguments? That's the argument that I would make. Portugal overthrew the government relatively peacefully. They didn't, it was like a bloodless revolution. I think that you can have the right to overthrow the government while also banning specific commodities, i.e., nukes, i.e., I don't know, mustard gas or something. Sorry for interrupting.
All right, let's go to Shadow Sprout. Sorry, Omni, Shadow Sprout, Kobe Katarana counter.
I think that, so in terms of the benefits, the policy that I advocate, I think most of the benefits were not really addressed. In that, one, you would expect it to result in better policy, because if what people on the right say is true, that guns generally have far more benefits than costs, well then if we made it so that people both got financial benefits from if they're used to stop crimes, and then paid if they're used to commit crimes, then you would expect guns to serve then you would expect that to be helpful to manufacturers. But if what people on the left say is true, that the dangers of guns outweigh the benefits, then you would expect it to be harmful to manufacturers. And you would particularly expect manufacturers to engage in their own privatized form of effective gun control rather than a top-down, one-size-fits-all solution that's less effective, which I think is why economists overwhelmingly favor market-based schemes more than the general population. And so, for example, 81% of economists support a market-based scheme in terms of environmental policy. What Maddie was saying about how it's a bigger threat to her, I think is clearly irrelevant. I mean, oppressive governments have killed like 100 million people in the 20th century. Regardless of what is a bigger threat to individuals, obviously oppressive governments is a major threat overall. However, I think that even though oppressive government is a risk, it's not clear that guns would increase our ability to resist these oppressive governments, given that I think violent revolutions are generally less successful than non-violent revolutions, even controlling for other factors. The point about car accident versus guns that was raised by Mr. Fanatic, I think Mr. Fanatic missed the point that I was raising. The point that I was raising was not that car accidents are an easier problem to solve, but rather, or it's not that it's a smaller problem, but rather that generally the solution is simpler, such that what kind of restrictions we should have on people who can drive is not that a very politically contentious issue. But I mean, maybe I would support like a Pigouvian scheme for car manufacturers to encourage figuring out better ways of doing it. I don't really know. But I mean, I think that
I don't think
the general problem raised with guns is that if I sell a gun to someone and they use it to commit a crime, the person who sells the gun to them does not bear the cost that's imposed on society. And they also don't reap the reward. And so making them both bear the cost and reap the rewards, I think would result in in more efficient guns. Now, I agree with what was said about how handguns are the result of the majority of gun deaths. And so I think that big, scary rifles are generally a bit of a red herring. Which is why I think that a more sensible scheme would be to, if I like my scheme, obviously, but the Pigouvian scheme, but I think that would likely result in more restrictions of things like handguns proportional to assault weapons, given that I think handguns are where where a lot of the deaths come from. And I think if I had to guess, I would say that they would probably be less likely to not sell certain type of guns in response to the market-based system, and more likely to instead do more background checks, so they don't restrict what types of guns can be sold, but rather they restrict who gets the guns, given that most of them are done with handguns. Most crimes are done.
Yeah, I don't.
Let's go to Scott. I just want to move. I want to move it down. Shadow Sprout, Kobe, Katarana counter. I can put you on the list though.
Okay, so I thankfully actually wrote down some notes from what Maddie was saying, but first to respond to Omni's thing, I think when it comes to market-based solutions, and regarding the protections of gun manufacturers, I don't think that we should hold them responsible, but I think if people want to try to, via, the legal route, I think they 100% should. It would be nice if we could actually see some class action lawsuits, towards gun manufacturers when there are mass shootings. I think the protections that gun manufacturers get from lawsuits is fucking insane. We definitely need to tear those down. I think that would be a good start. But to move on to Maddie's point, I think we have already, kind of beaten to the ground what the definition of assault weapons is. But you also use the quote, weapons of war, which one, I don't like, and two, is not necessarily true. It's more often that automatic rifles are used than semi-automatic. And also, you also mentioned it's not politically feasible to get rid of handguns. So I hope you realize that if we're talking about political feasibility and political capital, that it is a fucking ridiculous idea to try and pass any gun reform before the 2022 Senate elections, considering we have 3 seats we could win. One in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Ohio. These are states where gun culture is very much prevalent. And trying to pass any type of gun control at the federal level is not going to help our chances remotely. So I hope you acknowledge that. And then I also had that point about the tyrannical government. So, but I'll yield.
Could I respond really quickly?
Very quickly.
I promise. Okay. So actually, we talk about but we have all these seats up for election coming in 2022, including places like Ohio, Wisconsin, whatever, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Here's the cool thing about gun control reform and people wanting stricter gun control. That is largely supported by the vast cross-section of the American people, including a majority of Republicans, people that self-identify as Republicans, I believe, and I'll find the actual statistic, but it's something like 55% of Republicans are in favor of instituting stricter gun control measures, including things like universal background checks, things like closing the gun show loophole. So,
yeah, that's a different
when we
talking
talk about,
point.
but this, could threaten our chances for winning back the Senate or whatever, that's simply not true. And that's fear mongering because Americans want better gun control and they want this passed. And as they want it across the aisle.
Please.
What's stopping us from passing gun reform are gun rights lobbying groups, PACs, formally, not really much right now, the NRA and gun manufacturing lobbying groups who don't want their revenue to be cut.
Wait, can we address that really quick? Because she just said a bunch of nonsense.
No, I know, and I'll find.
No, I don't care. You don't need to. You don't have to, because what you're saying is complete nonsense. You're literally doing selective hearing. It is. It's selective hearing, because at the end of the day, yes, at the end of the people do want specific types of legislation. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about banning weapons. Do people want background checks? Sure. Do they want assault rifles bans? No, those are two totally different things.
Yeah.
So simply pointing out people want reform is a very broad term. Yes, people want reform. They don't want bans. And that's what we're talking about here. Stop it.
Okay, I was going to say that because she mentioned 2 things that do have majority support from Republicans, and it is true. They do want universal background checks.
Of course.
They do want to show us the gun show loophole. The correct
That's
term, by
great.
the way, is private seller loophole, because there are certain sellers that aren't listed. If you go to a gun show, there are guns that you'll try and buy where you actually will have to go through a background check. You want to know why? Because these are certified gun sellers that have a vending license, but you don't need a vending license. You don't need to be certified to sell guns, and you can still sell a gun. So that is, just pointing out. But the thing is, even if we're going to pass gun control at the federal level, it's not going to be those 2 things. It never is. It never is. We never pass bills that small. That is just unlikely. There are going to be a multitude of other things, and it's going to be a much larger.
law. Like we're also talking about a state law here too. So I know that we want to talk about like political feasibility, whatever, at the federal level, but like to also sort of like respond to that, what we're talking about in this term right now is a California state law. And so I don't know how helpful it is. I mean, again, we can go down that road and sort of debate the nuance of that. But like this specific topic is about the repealing of a state law where we banned assault weapons. So talking about the national feasibility, political feasibility of that, I don't know. I guess I just don't necessarily see the parallel.
Well, you were
Or
talking
like
about
or the
nationally.
usefulness of talking about federal.
We want to let some other people in. Sprout, Kobe, Katarana, Counter, and Fnatic.
Okay, so when that bitch, as its preferred pronoun, so when she was talking about the definition of assault weapons,
No, he's right.
it is a preferred pronoun. It's down there.
He's
I
being
listed it.
respectful.
I tried
It's a
listed
preferred
it.
Her
pronoun.
pronouns.
Thank you for seeing me, Spraticus. Thank you.
Not a problem. I love using preferred pronouns. California's definition of assault weapons is, in short, a semi-automatic centerfire rifle that has an overall length of less than 30 inches. A semi-automatic pistol that has the capacity to accept a detachable magazine in any one of the following: a threaded barrel capable of accepting a flash suppressor, forward hand grip, or silencer. And as we were talking about, everyone's like, "Oh, we love handguns. We love handguns." Okay, it's not politically feasible to get rid of handguns. That is underneath the definition of the California's definition of assault weapons. And to bring up stuff that's outside of what the California bill is disingenuous to say the least, because we're talking about California's bill. We're not talking about other things that Republicans want. Republicans are not pro the California bill, okay? So to bring up that 55% of Republicans are pro the California bill is absolutely disingenuous to say the absolute least.
I absolutely.
Is it my go? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely want to go in and change my thing to that
on the
nigga and
California
see if
bill,
any
but
of these
okay.
white folks
So,
will actually accidentally use
I
that word.
was looking up some data here, so I'm I was kind of half listening. I'm not exactly sure what the precise thing Maddie said, but I'm pretty sure she's correct here. I'll put it in chat, but it looks like a 2017 Pew poll of Americans say that 48% of gun owners and 77% of non-gun owning adults, 77% of non-gun owning adults strongly support or somewhat favor banning assault.
Hey, we need 400 more points on this boost. Can somebody hit me with the 400?
It seems like there is support here.
Steam points for the boost.
I don't know. It seems there. Other than that, I just wanted to very briefly just kind of build on something I said earlier to counterpoints. I think which was relevant. I think that when we're looking at countries that have fundamentally different infrastructures, a fundamentally different construction of their industrialization to America, which I would say that these places like say Algeria or Vietnam, which are examples of more modern revolutions, these are examples of that. I think that it's very difficult to try to translate them to America. There's so many, as you said, the material conditions of modern America are so complicated and so much more different. I really don't think it's viable. But
I don't remember where to go to look for that.
Sort of dialogue on this with you and anybody else, because I think that's a little bit of a off topic. I'd like to just very briefly though, for my last thing here, address the kind of the core of one of the questions was asked by Prime, which is like, does this ruling kind of mean that like all banning on firearms is unconstitutional? I would argue that's one of the reasons I really don't like the Second Amendment is because it is written in a very different context, and nowadays there's what it means to have a weapon or a firearm is very complicated. And I think that you need to update these things in a big structural way. So yeah. Anyways, that's my take.
Katarana, Counter, Fnatic.
I don't even have a point anymore.
Just have you go next because there's like so many people that you forget what you were trying to say like 20 minutes earlier. So I can
Counter, Fnatic.
You're muted.
Wow. Brilliant. So brilliant. So eloquent. That's what he's known for. He's even more brilliant. And he's more eloquent. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, if we go to Fnatic, Fnatic, can you out top his eloquence?
I think I can. I don't know. I was afraid that I was. Actually, I thought I was going to be muted. I think, what's it called? Omni. I think you're really missing the point of the challenge, right? Like when I was pointing out the car accident thing, it wasn't like, it was to point out like that your statement that these are easier to address or easier to fix is not true, because if it was easier to fix, we would see less of that than we do of the other thing, but we don't. And the reason why we don't is because it's not something that's easier to fix. Like it's a big problem. not something that I'm saying that we need to do some crazy legislation to deal with. It's just kind of the human condition. But I don't know. I think this whole idea about like, oh, car accidents can be like completely controlled for really simply. Like I just don't think that's true at all. I think that's what I was trying to get at. Like I don't know if you're missing that, but that was the point I was trying to make.
I'm available.
Okay, we'll go then counter the non.
Okay, so my dog knocked out my power, so I'm going to blame my dog that time. So you guys keep giving me too much good shit that takes me way too long to address. So just to address the market-based schemes for guns, I'm basically going to use Maddie's appeal, which is like, pragmatically, this just isn't going to fucking happen. It's just not going to happen, okay? That nobody's going to go for the market-based thing. The anti-gun people are not going to go for the thing. The pro-gun people are not going to go for the thing. Whether or not it would solve the problems, maybe the fucking manufacturers will come up with some like changeling gun that like it's like a transformer, and depending on like legal context, it shifts in your hand to be like an assault rifle if you're fighting the government.
I know how to do
or
it.
a pistol if you're defending your house,
I don't have to
or
ask.
a fucking taser if you're defending yourself, against somebody who doesn't have a weapon or something. I don't fucking know. I just don't think that like the market can solve all these problems. And I also don't think like liability insurance is going to solve all these problems, and also the political feasibility of this is like zero. So while it might be theoretically good and you're using theoretical market forces in order to address the problem, I just don't think pragmatically it's there. Kobe, we basically need to have like a 2-hour discussion on like post-industrial nations and revolutions. Unfortunately, I don't feel equipped in the time I have to address all of that. So I'm just going to address Maddie because that's fun, because we like to beef. So the technical efficiency is what righties are chipping away at when they're saying like the assault weapons definition is like nebulous or stupid or whatever. There are plenty of products that are on the market right now that are just as efficient at killing people as so-called assault weapons. The reason why Republicans or pro-gun people take an issue with the assault weapon definition is because they're like the Virginia Tech shooting had 32 people killed, and the gentleman used a .22 long rifle pistol and a 9mm pistol. Oftentimes it's the environment, the context, whether or not it's a soft target, whether or not it's a hard target. There's a whole bunch of other things that like go into the calculus of how a mass shooting unfolds or how a terrorist attack unfolds. Also with it's not the government that's a threat, it's mass shooters. On a statistics basis, this is just incorrect. Whether or not we're talking about American intervention overseas, killing civilians and foreign nationals, or if we're talking about cops killing people on an annual basis. Cops kill about 1,000 American civilians on an annual basis. I think mass shooters maybe kill like 30. And then also like we're saying all these things within the age of Trump. Trump was like a neo-fascist dictator who's like reviving white supremacy and is on the like verge of like basically killing all the brown people, or deporting all the brown people and killing all the black people. So how can we say this with a straight face that like, oh, we don't want weapons of war in order to resist a tyrannical government in an industrialized nation, when we're also saying outside the other side of our mouth that Trump is a neo-fascist dictator that has like corrupted, convoluted, and nearly destroyed some of our social institutions that are holding our societal fabric together. Basically, finally, I want to point out, because like oftentimes it comes down to like almost like I want people to be nuanced. The Commonwealth hasn't banned weapons altogether. In Canada, they have access to rifles and shotguns and pistols and all that kind of stuff, but you basically have to get permission from your local sheriff in order to have a gun. Same thing with the UK. But what happens as a result of this, it's like, yeah, you reduce homicides by a significant amount, I think by 2/3. But then also what ends up happening is your freedom or right to self-defense is at the whim of your local magistrate. You do not have the ability to get a weapon unless your local sheriff wants you to have one. And then it becomes a privilege, not a right. And it becomes a privilege that only the government can extend to you. So I just want people to know that like in the UK and Canada, they haven't banned firearms. They've just made them a privilege of the wealthy and connected. And I think that's incredibly fucked up. And I yield right there.
Okay. All right. We will go to...
I agree with everything you said.
And then, yeah.
So I think the point that Counterpoints raised about political feasibility is definitely true, that it's not politically feasible. But I mean, I'm not advocating like trying like activists
You've
trying
been
to get it passed.
misrepresenting my point so hard in the way that you've tried to quote them. I don't know that you're capable of even following people's points. Because literally every time you've tried to paraphrase, it's been wrong.
Politically feasible is if enough people talk about them and discuss them. The fact that a policy will not pass is not an argument as to why the policy should not pass. The point that was made about Trump, I mean, it was to show why I think resisting government tyranny will often do more harm than good. I mean, I think that Trump's immigration policy was bad, but I don't think that it would have been good if immigrants who are going to be deported had just started shooting members of ICE. And there had just been a lot of them shooting members of ICE. That just seems like it would result in, more violence, more backlash, etc. And I think that the historical record.
So what if he was dragging them to camps in order to do forced hysterectomies? Would they be justified then to do it?
I mean, maybe the people who are getting forced hysterectomies would.
That's
but
stupid.
I mean, the thing is, if we just look throughout history, generally, when revolutions employ violence, they are less likely to achieve their goals, and they're more likely to result in backlash. So it seems better to not use violence. Furthermore,
okay,
I think
but here's my problem, because you've said this, and I'm sorry for the back and forth, Prime, but I think it'll be fun. Would you say this to an Armenian in Turkey in 1930 or 1940? Would you say this to a Jew in Germany in 1930 and 1940, that they shouldn't resist the government with force because there's a statistically higher likelihood that pacifistic means are going to result in a better result?
I mean, maybe. Like I
wouldn't.
Think that, well, okay. I mean, if a policy is going to result in if your action is going to result in people being shot, B, you being less likely to achieve your goals, and C, there being more backlash from wider society, which results in more overall oppression, even if the motives of the people who are employing violence are laudable, I think that the method is ineffective and will result in more violence. But the more important point is, I think that if there is tyranny in the United States, it is unlikely to come from a small group of top-down dictators. It is far more likely to come from a large mass of people who are in favor of oppressive policies. And I think that, if 90% of Americans support a policy that involves oppressing 5% of the population, then if the 5% of the population starts shooting people, I generally think that the historical record shows that's not a very good way of preventing the specific form of tyranny.
Once you're done, Obi, give it a try.
Yeah. The last point is, I think that the point that was raised by Mr. Fanatic about how car accident deaths are something that kill more people. I think that that's true. The distinction that I would draw is I think that there is a huge amount of political conflict over what is the best form of gun control. There is very little political conflict over whether we should add more things to driver's tests or not. And so it's a problem that increased market-based solutions would not result in solutions that work that well. But I mean, based on what you said, I think there's a case for maybe having a Pigouvian based scheme. But yeah, I think that if the gun control scheme would be effective at saving lives, then we should do it.
Just to briefly respond, I would say that telling an oppressed group that a specific method of resistance is less or more effective is pretty categorically different than telling them that resistance in and of itself is not something they should do. So I would argue that that's sort of what Omni is saying here, is that the specific form of resistance is not going to get them the things they, not going to get them what they would like, right?
Sure, but okay, and Prime, I'll be brief, but this is where I feel like macroscopic analysis loses the microscopic. So I'm not going to show up to a Rohingya Muslim on the west side of Burma right now and be like, hey bro, have you ever thought about peacefully protesting instead of shooting the soldiers that are coming to massacre you and your family?
Does Burma even exist anymore?
Say that shit. So even on the whole, if there was a mass protest, if a mass protest between Rohingya Muslims and sympathetic Burmese folk would yield a better result in which the Rohingya overall would have a more utilitarian, macroscopic, better result, I think that can be true. While at the same time, on the interpersonal level, if I go and tell that guy that thing, hey, have you tried, basically a peaceful organizational cross Burmese thing, and then the soldiers show up the next day and they fucking execute his ass, he's not going to be the person who actually benefits from that macroscopic 10 fucking head utilitarian fucking movement. And on top of that, basically it's he's not going to be able to enjoy the analysis that you're providing him.
It's been
because
that.
he's
It's
gonna be
been
fucking
Myanmar
dead.
for a long time,
So
right?
that's kind of where the microscopic and the macroscopic have to have a relationship. They are not divorced from each other.
I just to briefly, I actually completely agree with you. I feel like I do feel like we're still kind of talking past each other. What the advice I'd give to an individual is not the same that advice I'd give to a group or to give to a political organization. But I do get your point that needs to be factored in. I'm sorry, I left the call again. I'm so sorry. I keep hitting.
Yeah, it's fine. All right. Anyone else? No one else?
Oh, I mean, I have 10,000 other fucking things to say. You fucking kidding
Okay,
me?
go ahead.
All right, well, this could be a closing if we're thinking about moving on. So basically, Shadow said something that triggered the piss out of me, and I love you, Shadows. But basically, like, we should. It's insane that like gun manufacturers don't have the ability to have class action lawsuits brought against them. As every lefty has so clearly articulated within this panel, is that a gun is designed to kill and to maim. That is its purpose. So if a gun fires and it hurts or kills a person, it's fulfilling its designated purpose. What's happening is that can either be done in a legal context or that's being done in an illicit context. So it's pretty clear that the liable party in this situation is not the person who created a firearm that does its function as performed. It's the person who's committing the illicit act. So that's kind of where like the movement of liability from like the individual to the corporation is fucking weird.
I feel like it was such a stupid thing. I didn't even want to address it. I literally didn't want to say anything regarding it.
Like, so for me, the amount of liability that would be needed, like, you're right. Like, in order for gun manufacturers to sell anything except for fucking BB guns or tear gas or like fucking pepper ball guns, they would basically need to create like a user insurance scheme in which like liability was distributed across all gun owners. That is the only way in which these like costs could be borne by the industry, by gun manufacturers, and by private citizens.
Omni, does that make sense?
I mean, it was his point, so I hope it makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree that there would be liability schemes, but the point is, given that the liabilities that the sort of insurance market would have an incentive to make profit, and the way that they make profit is by through a combination of making sure that the guns save the most lives and cause the fewest deaths. You'd expect, for instance, them to impose certain requirements on people in order to pay for the insurance scheme. So like, in order for you to get our insurance, you have to like do background checks, and it would, rather than a sort of inefficient top-down government system, it would result in a system.
But as a white man who doesn't live in the ghetto, okay, this could be cost prohibitive for some of our folks who have been discriminated against historically and don't have access to higher levels of means, of like material means. So basically, what you're saying is you can't get a gun unless you can buy into the insurance scheme. Well, that leaves an entire set of people who are uninsurable or can't have access to the firearms because they're fucking poor. So they probably can barely afford the gun, let alone the insurance scheme. And so basically, if you're let's say a pizza delivery driver who's working for a mom and pop shop delivering in the fucking hood, and your mom and pop shop gives you permission to have a CWP, because we all know that being a pizza delivery driver is more dangerous than being a cop, then you're just not going to be able to defend yourself, and that's fucked up. So insurance doesn't solve everything. The private market doesn't solve everything. There are market failures, and I would see that as one.
I would like to interject because Connor talked about...
Can I just say something really fast? Because what you said was a direct response. Just to clarify, the scheme, it would be an insurance kit for the sellers of guns rather than for the individual buyers of guns. And if you're worried about the cost of guns being prohibitive, then I guess you could like use the funds raised to like give subsidies for people to own guns or something. I don't know. Or to like fund programs that give money to low-income people.
Well, listen, if CTV was here, he would have a raging fucking boner for everything you've said, because it's all market-based solutions. So even if I don't agree with it, I appreciate your thought process.
I agree with that too. I think the free market is pretty base, and I should probably try and talk to you one-on-one sometime. I think I could black pill you into neoliberalism. So, but to respond to what you guys are both saying, because you are mentioning, insurance schemes, and something that insurance obviously is meant to do is ensure you and cover you when accidents happen. And a very common accident, believe it or not, with a lot of firearm owners who are irresponsible, I may add. I hope, Connor, you are very responsible and you keep your gun in a lockbox at least 6 feet above the ground so your small child cannot get to it. But a lot of gun owners are not nearly as responsible as you. And there have been, believe it or not, the amount of injuries caused between 2000 and 2010 because the little kids find access to daddy's gun is more than the injuries caused from mass shootings. That's just injuries, so that's not factoring deaths, obviously. But yeah, so my thing is, if a child is easily able to access a gun and easily turn off the safety, and someone's like, hey, I don't think my 5-year-old child should be able to turn off the safety, I'm suing you for having such an ineffective safety. I don't see, I feel like you have to at least agree that the level of protections from lawsuits from gun makers is.
I think Diana's better. I think the Nightbringer for
Morgana I don't get how you're saying it's not too high. I feel like it should be easier to sue them, whether or not it actually goes through is another story. But they should at least be able to sue. I just don't get your argument.
Wait, Shadows. My personal pistol, I carry an M&P 2.0, does not have a safety on it. So can I?
That's
so. Are you saying that I can sue them because my pistol was given to me without a safety, even though that's the way I bought it?
No, I was mentioning an instance where a kid is able to turn off a safety. I don't know why you own a gun without a safety.
Most guns nowadays don't have safeties.
I own a gun without a safety because one, I have trigger discipline to where I don't put my finger on the trigger unless I'm planning on shooting whatever's in front of me. 2, my trigger actually has a safety inside of it to where if something catches the trigger, it won't fire. So if something accidentally just taps the trigger, it won't fire. It's a design safety to where you have to have your finger on the trigger and pulling for it to actually fire. If you put a string on it, it won't fire. And so it does not have a designed mechanical safety. Also, mechanical safeties can and will fail. Mechanical safeties are not 100%. So just because you have a mechanical safety on does not mean that gun will not shoot, which is why you're taught again and again and again in firearm safeties class that you do not point a weapon at anything you are not intending to shoot. It doesn't matter if the safety's on, it doesn't matter if it's loaded. An unloaded weapon is a loaded weapon. You point it at what you're intending to shoot, and you don't put your finger on the trigger until you are ready to destroy whatever is downrange.
Fair enough. All right. I'd like to say something to Connor, to apply something you said long ago, talking about whether the heart of this matter is the axiomatic principle of whether you can defend yourself from the government or not. That's what it is to conservatives. That's what conservatives like to think, right? But the people calling for gun reform, that's never the case. We're never talking about that. We're talking about the lives that are lost within our communities every day, right? Not your imagined cowboy fantasies of taking down the government where you and your buddies, your drinking buddies, will go down and take down your local Gestapo club, right? It's not the way it works, right? That's what we're talking about, is actually keeping community safe, and not, whatever you've been thinking. So I guess a deep disagreement, and I think it's closer just to the heart of the larger discussions that gun discussion is that we're often talking about literally two different things, right? Conservatives are talking about that oftentimes, saying oh yes, right to defend against a government, right? And everyone else is saying, I don't want my children to be gunned down in the streets. So you can respond to that.
Yeah, so there's a utilitarian calculus that's basically being made here that I take fairly seriously, which is basically what happens if it all goes fucking sideways? That's basically the question that I ask myself. I think that's the question that a lot of conservatives ask themselves, and it appeals to motivated reasoning. I think Drew Welty and Layman have talked to this previously, and I understand that you view your world as more pragmatic. But for me, as somebody who studies history really closely, I think that there's just a whole host of scenarios that I could come up with that might be anecdotal, but you would absolutely not be comfortable with. During the age of like Reconstruction, during the early 20th century, we obviously had the KKK and lynch mobs, and we also had racist police who were in charge of certain counties. So under your model, during that exact historical time frame, a racist sheriff could say, hey, Prime, you don't have the right to keep a firearm because I can't think of a single justifiable reason for you to have one. And as a result, you are now at the mercy of the militia or the KKK as a result. I, on the other hand, would basically be saying like, hey, Prime's a U.S. citizen. He deserves the right to keep and defend arms inside his home. He can defend it again, or he can defend himself not just against people that are illegally trying to hurt him, but if the government does something, let's say under color of law, a sheriff's deputy shows up and you basically know that when he shows up, people get killed, you can fucking kill him too, as long as you can prove it that he's basically using under color of law, basically to murder people. But just to do the olive branch, basically, I think there's plenty that we can do. I think American gun culture is fucking disgusting. I think it's sick. I think there's so much shit that we can do when it comes to basically promoting safe storage, promoting proper gun safety. The reason why Sprouticus was able to talk about like gun safety rules, like just ad hoc, like he was literally just able to cite them out of his mouth, is because they've been fucking beat into him. I like talking about responsibilities along with rights, and I think Americans are fucking terrible at it. So the right to keep and bear arms should come with the responsibility to know what the fuck you're talking about. It should come with the responsibility for safe storage. It should come with the responsibility of knowing the safety rules. It should come with the responsibility of proper weapons handling. And I think I'll leave it here, but basically I think there's a lot of things that you and I would agree with that wouldn't feel like a philosophical violation to you, and wouldn't feel like a philosophical violation to me, that would reduce the amount of people who are getting hurt and killed in our communities.
So I would say that there are a lot more race riots and massacres of African Americans throughout the past by whites than the Tulsa massacre. And those people were armed, and that didn't stop it. In fact, that encouraged. Hold on. But that encouraged, literally, that helped encourage white violence. I'm just saying. Hold on. But the point is, the point that you've made, and that everyone makes, that just having these guns is going to be the thing that protects, or deters. But it doesn't seem to do that. Like there are plenty of massacres, and we don't talk about them in history because, well, white people find it inconvenient, right? But all the series of massacres that's happened all across the U.S. Those people had guns too. They were armed, and it failed nonetheless, right?
Well, at least they had a fighting chance.
They died. Yeah, by the hundreds.
I would rather die armed than
literally
unarmed.
by the hundreds sometimes.
I would rather die free than live a slave.
Fuck that shit.
Okay, please don't throw that around, that nonsense. I'll live as a slave from people who are actually enslaved, right? Like, okay, thank you, that's nice, buddy. But like history has shown, it just hasn't been the protection. It just like,
but I have this
results. But like looking at the actual results, you can keep saying that. Looking at the actual results, when people were armed. And it didn't save them.
But I've had this conversation. I literally had this conversation last night. So excuse me, but there are very cool people in history, such as Harriet Tubman, who literally armed herself, taught herself how to shoot, ran the fucking Underground Railroad, helped slaves escape. And I am sure that every single fucking slave that she helped escape, that was important. Now, was she like a macroscopic, like fucking policy that helped like free the slaves? No, she wasn't. But on the microscopic level, she was able to impose a certain level of moral justice on her own level because she exercised her right to self-defense, even when the country, the Confederacy that she was a part of, said that she didn't have the ability to do so. Also, I would have to Google him in order to look up his fucking name, but there's also an incredibly badass fucking slave that captured a Confederate gunboat, flew like the correct flags in order to communicate with Confederate ships that he was a friendly, escaped to the fucking North, made it to the North, fought in the fucking Union, and then became a business owner afterwards and like died happy and fucking retired at the age of 60. So I understand, like, history is replete with examples of like fucked up shit. But the reason why history is so interesting is because there's these microscopic examples of people who do incredibly interesting shit that feels more moral, more justified, more in line with the ideals that we speak to. And these people should be our fucking heroes. So I wouldn't tell Harriet Tubman, you don't have the right to resist. You don't have the right to fucking keep and bear arms. I would say, Harriet Tubman, fucking go shoot that motherfucker if he's coming at you after you. Same thing with that escaped slave.
Those are literally one-offs because like it went well for them, but do you know how many people that were armed, how many like different like slave rebellions that were armed and like were not successful just because of the arming? Like
but this
are, like,
is
one-off situations.
This is the moral question that I would ask you. Is it better to be armed and to fight for what you believe in, whether that's freedom, autonomy, self-determination, whatever the fuck you believe in, right? Is it better to be armed and to fight and die for a cause you believe in, or to be cowed into a corner and basically subject to the violence of the state? That's the question. And basically, like, this is something that, like, fundamentally, like, when we talk about freedom, like liberty from government, conservatives and libertarians basically believe that your freedom only starts when you assert it, when you say that you have it. If you don't say that you have it, it doesn't fucking exist. So if the federal government comes out and they say, we passed the Patriot Act, you're a domestic terrorist, you're not allowed to own assault weapons, if you're pro-constitutionalist, you're a fucking piece of shit, and you need to be cowed into the corner and basically eliminated from history. Me and people like me say, fuck that shit. We know the principles that this country was founded on. We believe in the principles that this country was founded on. And on top of that, we're willing to die to make sure that those principles propagate and continue into the next generation. And we would rather die free and fighting for what we believe in than be cowed into a safe corner. I would rather be dead than in the CCP. I would rather be dead.
Counterpoints.
Than in Nazi
It just
Germany.
this seems so disgusting to me because it sounds like you're literally.
Why the fuck does this sound
okay?
disgusting?
I'm gonna explain why. Do you think I just said that and all I was gonna say in isolation?
No.
Because it's okay. Then I'll explain why. Great. Then I'll explain why. Great. Let me explain why. Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Lord have mercy. It sounds like you're being an opportunist and using a saying that was used by slaves, like that had nothing to do with gun reform, and you're trying to misappropriate this phrase for your own ends right now. That's why it sounds disgusting. Does that not sound like an accurate accurate representation of what's happening right now?
No, I think all human beings have
you are
the right to
disgusting.
self-defense, including slaves.
Yeah, that's
I have
not
no idea what the fuck
that
you're
has
talking
nothing. That has nothing to do with the point of you misusing a quote, misappropriating it to fight for your cause, but it had nothing to do with gun reform. It had nothing to do with the ability to own guns. That's not what this thing was about. It's disgusting.
Everything that I've said for the past fucking 10 minutes is precisely why balance of power politics exists. I have no idea what you're taking issue with.
I just explained it and you're disgusting.
I think he's taking issue with me saying I think he's taking issue with the same thing Prime took issue to. That I brought up the quote, I'd rather die free than live a slave. And that was from the revolution, and I brought it up because that is the mindset the founding fathers had.
Hold on,
when
from
they
people
created,
who enslaved others.
Oh
Let's
yes,
make
I
sure.
would love to hear the founding fathers.
I can't even finish.
Hold on, that's fine. But tell us more about that, right? From slaveholders, right? Talking about freedom, in terms of like dying on their feet rather than living as a slave, as they went when they went back to the plantations and beat people to death. Please tell me more about that. No,
okay, I will fucking tell you about it.
I was talking to Sprout. But,
very convenient, but okay.
I was talking to Sprout. He was the one fucking talking. What are you convenient? I can go. We can go to you later. Don't worry, we can handle you too. Sprout.
So I don't think slavery is moral whatsoever. I've consistently gone after the founding fathers for that. I've consistently said that they were wrong for having slavery. There was, if you actually look in the Federalist Papers, there was discussion with it. The founding fathers didn't all agree on slavery, like people try and make it out to be. Not all the founding fathers agreed that slaves should exist. There was discussion on that, whether or not slaves should exist in this new country. Eventually it came to a conclusion that it's going to end up in a war. But I'm against slavery. I don't know why I'm being attributed that I'm pro-slavery.
Who said that? Stop right there. Who said that? Who said that? Who? Which one? Which one of us said that?
Well, you're bringing the attribution with what you're saying, Brian.
No. You're doing this thing that conservatives do all the time, right? And doing the whole victim blaming thing. Like what? Literally, no one said that. Not one of us implied that. I would never
Okay.
imply that. I don't think that of you. Katarana, why would she imply that to you? Why would a Fnatic apply it? No one has said that to you. No one. But you just assumed that it was, right? Like, oh, I'm being attacked on something that has to do with slavery, so it must mean they think that I'm pro-slavery. None of us said that. None of us even applied it. No one was thinking that. So
I'm
you
glad.
move that-
I'm
move that
glad.
past.
Okay. I'm glad no one implied it. No one was thinking that. I've not been so lucky in the past. With that being said, I used that
What the
quote
straw
because
man?
that was their thought process when they made the Second Amendment. That was a very short and concise quote that I could just pull out, and it was their thought process when making the Second Amendment, and it's why the Second Amendment exists today. I'm against gun control. Gun control started off as being racist because the racists in government didn't want the colored citizens to have weapons. That's originally why they came out with gun control. I'm against gun control. I think that we should teach people the responsible way to carry and the responsible way to have firearms, and I think we'd be a much safer community for it.
Yeah, listen, I gotta say, it's a little cringe to attribute that claim to founding fathers who were slave owners.
It was Frederick Douglass.
Unfortunately, that was actually a quote by Frederick
Douglass,
the famous freed slave. I'd rather it's better to die free.
He's still considered a founding father, but okay.
Frederick Douglass.
What? Okay, I'm over it. I'm
Okay,
over this.
okay,
I'm over this.
okay,
I'm
so
over
who
this.
was it?
I'm
Who was
over
it?
this.
Who was it?
I'm over this.
Frederick Douglass said the quote: "It's better to die free than live as a slave."
Do you know what color Frederick Douglass is?
No, I know what color he is. No, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about someone else.
Man,
That's bad. So no, it was someone that was being hung, and okay, maybe I pulled the wrong quote, but I'm still okay. There's a quote extremely similar to that, and it's from a founding father before they got.
Well,
hung.
okay, no. So the quote you're probably thinking about is probably like "live free or die," which is it's a one that comes from the French Revolution, right?
Okay.
Or the
Well,
Tree
either
of
way.
Liberty one of the others. But okay,
Either way,
let's
it's a lot
go
of
to
quotes like
let's
that.
go to shadows and then counterpoints.
Yeah, so Sporadic has actually got to this before I could mention it, but since Connor brought it up and, brought up the KKK, it is very important to understand that, when it comes to, usurpacious governments and denying rights from people, in the majority opinion from Dred Scott, the right to bear arms was an issue mentioned, and that they did not want to consider, the black man. Of course, they did not use the word black at the time, but I'm going to be politically correct. They did not want to give the black man the right to have bear arms. And also, of course, the first ever state level gun control in this country was in southern states because it's obviously going to be easier to terrorize an unarmed population than an armed one. So yeah, and then also a better quote, I think I think to use here would be the African proverb: "It is better to live 1 year as a lion than 100 years as a sheep." So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh boy.
All right. So basically, it doesn't. I don't give a fuck. Again, this.
I know
this
you
is
don't.
kind of
I know you
getting
don't, 'cause you're
back
racist.
To,
Say it.
our
Say
history
it.
point earlier
Say
from
it.
fucking Kobe.
Say it.
If something was said 1900 years ago, but the concept still bears fruit, and the solution that they basically propose still has a purpose in the real world today, then I still think that is an interesting concept. So I don't give a fuck if it's some racist fucking dickhead in fucking 1812 talking about how a 3% fucking 3% tax on fucking tea was akin to fucking chattel slavery, or if it was Frederick fucking Douglass post fucking Civil War saying like, no, like this is legitimately something that we should have fucking fought for. If the idea is true, the idea is true. So the way that free societies, Fnatic, you can fucking come at me. I have no idea why I'm saying if a fucking idea is true, regardless of source, it's fucking true. That should not be a contentious fucking point.
It's
So
because
I
it's
have no
missing
idea.
the point. It's because you're literally again.
Tell me
You-
the
I,
fucking
I,
point.
I explained it already, but apparently you weren't
do it
listening.
again.
I will do it again. It's the idea of misappropriating a phrase that is at the center of the heart of many people that are still living under systemic oppression today, and misusing that quote to try to misappropriate it for your stupid gun idea is ridiculous. It's dismissive. It's offensive, and I've explained it enough, but you just don't want to hear it because you don't care.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, you're right. I don't fucking care.
'Cause
The
you're
reason why I don't
disgusting.
fucking care- No, fuck you, all right, buddy? Fuck you. No, because the fucking fight of free people is not exclusive to fucking black people throughout history. Get the fuck
Disgusting.
out of here.
No one
You
ever
wanna
said that
fucking-
either, you idiot. No one said that. No one said that only slaves were free to fight for something. I'm saying this quote had a direct usage, a direct meaning. It's literally named in it. It literally says die as a slave. I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't just a general quote. It had a very specific usage, a very specific meaning that you are misappropriating.
And
This
let
is
Connor
bullshit.
respond, please.
Okay, that fanatic. This is the reason why I don't give a fuck about this
I
goddamn
know, you
perspective.
idiot.
You are not the only fucking person throughout history who has oppression in your fucking history.
Oh
you are not the
my
only person who
God.
has talked about fucking,
This is so
freedom or
stupid.
the balance of liberty or the balance of power or
What
fucking
an
anything.
idiot.
This is a universal fucking human struggle.
What an
So to
idiot.
get fucking butthurt that I'm taking one of your
Yeah.
great heroes, quoting him,
Yeah.
and saying that it's relevant to the fucking human condition is literally like, it's weird fucking policing. And Kobe agreeing with you is also fucking weird to me.
Yeah,
Guess
it's
what?
crazy,
There's
huh?
there's been plenty of fucked up shit throughout history. You don't have a monopoly on fucked up shit, okay? So don't fucking get butthurt over fucking concepts that universally apply to humanity.
Yeah, it's crazy. No. It doesn't universally apply because this is the quote. The quote. I know you're done. You were done the second you said that stupid thing, and everybody in the chat can see it. That you were done. That you were done. You were done the second you all lives matter this situation and tried to imply that and tried to imply that we've all experienced the same type of oppression. That this direct quote talking about slavery somehow it applies to everyone. Everyone here has experienced it, right? Yeah, you're an idiot, and it shows.
All right. Well,
That's not even what I said, and you can go fuck yourself, buddy.
All right.
Everyone here heard it.
Omni, could
fuck you?
Wait, could I actually
I'll
first?
do Cody,
I got brought up.
respond, and then
All I want to say is my perspective.
Well, yeah, what I was just gonna say.
I'm
I'm just going to briefly, sorry, because like I brought up, I'm sorry. My perspective on this is that I think that I don't think that at all, ever, Fanatic ever implied that black people are the only people that experience oppression or even just slavery in general. We're specifically talking about whether or not it's like appropriate to accidentally misattribute a quote by like one of the most accomplished freed slaves in America to people that owned black people. That I feel like is the contention in that thing there. That would be my position.
I never even made any attribution.
I know, not to you. That would no, not to you. That was where we started talking about the quote in general. I think that's incredibly important to bring up, right?
So, Omni, I'm going to go to you, but there's no reason to introduce the market into whatever you're about to say. So, I plead.
I mean, what I was just gonna say is this getting to like element of politics where it's just sort of a shouting match of people emoting at each other, which I think should we move to another topic in this?
I'll decide
No,
that. Don't worry.
this is content, baby.
Yeah.
It's not even all right.
But we didn't get to the heart of the thing that I was discussing with Connor in which way, right?
If you want to get to it, I'm fucking down. But like,
okay.
I don't think I've made any fucking. I don't think I've said a single fucking thing that I couldn't defend right now.
Sure. Okay. Whatever.
In your piss
my
poor
point
brain,
being
I can imagine.
that the two sides of this again are talking about two different things, two different arguments, right? We're talking about keeping our communities safe, right? Like it seems in the conservative mind, keeping communities safe is from the government, right? And it's not as if the African Americans don't understand the government being a threat. I mean, we have the police, and they're a threat. So, like, we understand that concept, but at the same time, going back to the whether guns can protect African Americans, sure. Well, I guess then we can start attacking cops then, right? And see how far that gets us. So. Like that's the actual threat in our neighborhoods right now. Well, one of them. Is our police, right? No, hold on. No, the police are actually can actually be a threat. Can actually be a threat. There's crime too. Crime too. Yes, I get that. There's other crime too. But the police can actually be a fucking threat within our neighborhoods. But using that right against those weapons against the tyrannical state, right, won't get us very far. I think you can acknowledge that too. So when we talk about keeping our community safe, we're talking about like the massive amount of crime and the easy access to gun that criminals have, right? So go ahead.
Sure. So, okay. So for me, what I would be infinitely more interested in, because this is like brought up in the context of Chicago, right? There's like immediately across the border in Indiana, there's like precipitously less gun violence. Okay. So the access to firearms, while real and compared to Western European countries, is a variable in whether or not gun violence or violence in general exists. It's clear that you can basically change some of the variables in the material conditions in order to reduce gun violence that have nothing to do with removing firearms from law-abiding citizens. So what I would say, what my pro-leftist argument would be, is that there's been systemic inequality, systemic racism, like historically, like blacks and people of color and brown people in general have been fucked over in this country. Okay, that's just undeniable. But if we were to look at a way to reduce violence overall as an intergenerational project, then what we would do as a fucking gun dumb fuck, I guess, is I would want to work on you with things that you would probably agree with. Universal pre-K, high quality education, improving job opportunities, universal secondary education, reducing recidivism, education in prisons, prison reform, moving from a punitive model to a rehabilitative model. There are so many things that we could do. Removing felony as a lifetime record. Basically, like after 2 years or whatever amount of fucking penance that you do after you get out, you basically the term felon is removed from your record. That way you can be gainfully employed in a normal situation. That way people can actually see a light at the end of the tunnel rather than two options, which is basically being a permanent felon and working at fucking Taco Bell or fucking slinging weed on the fucking street corner. So there are so many things that we could do that would actually like bring down violence and improve people's lives that has nothing to do with taking away firearms.
Great. 100%. Love it. Right. All the things that the left has actually already been working on and the right has been obstructionist to. Great. I agree. Let's dismantle the conservative project and then maybe we can get to move forward in society. No. Let's dismantle the entire conservative project and then we'll actually have some movement on any of these things. Great. But while we're waiting for that, while we're waiting for all those things to happen, those great things that, again, that people like me, people like Maddie, right, are fighting for, right? We still have neighborhoods, right, that are filled with crime. We still have mass shootings happening. We still have domestic abusers, right, having access to weapons and using that against their partners. We have all those things are happening right this second, right? So now, if we could change the world immediately, and apply that, then I would take a second look at this argument. Like, well, do we really need to get rid of guns, right? Looking at our utopia's crime statistics, right? Then maybe I'd be with you. But right now, we don't have that.
Okay. The reason why I come onto lefty shows in general, and the reason why I feel comfortable, screaming at people, is because I'm trying to get other people who are of completely different political persuasions to understand my perspective. And not only that, how they can sell their politics in a specific way that actually appeals to people like me, people who are libertarian, raised conservative, raised social conservative, raised Christian conservative, and all that kind of stuff. And if you wanted to take better schools, better education, better social programs, all that kind of stuff, then you have to appeal to what's called motivated reasoning. This is something that Drew Welty talks about. This is something that Layman talks about all the time. You basically have to take your policy and repackage it into a conservative list. And the way that you do that, specifically with all of the policies that I was talking about, where we're talking about like education reform, ooh, sounds expensive. Universal pre-K, ooh, sounds expensive. So universal secondary education, ooh, sounds expensive. Do we have the money for it? That's the conservative instinct, right? But what you can say is, hey, Republicans have been fucking you in the ass for the past 30 years. They've been telling you that universal pre-K, which costs $26 billion a year, is not financially feasible while spending $48 billion a year in Afghanistan without even blinking. Republicans are telling you that secondary and trade vocational education is not financially accessible, but at the same time, they've been spending $48 fucking billion a year in Afghanistan without fucking blinking. Both of these are tenable things that will have immediate impact on people's lives, that will significantly improve. And don't say the material conditions, because they're going to know your economy, right? What you do say is you say improve American families, because there is nothing that gives a conservative a fucking rock hard boner like monogamy, traditional marriage, and little fucking children running around in fucking quarter acre fucking 1,400 square foot houses. So if you sell them the fantasy of America supported by these fucking programs, you can sell it to the people that you need bipartisan support from.
Except that we have another side that's been scaremongering on exactly the opposite the entire time. Again, the conservative project.
Then let's beat those cunts up together, Prime.
I-
You and I can do
Okay,
it.
you and
We
I
can do it.
Connor, right? No, because look, I'm sure I know that you and I have vast amounts of agreement, right? And you and I can do this. But the Conservative Project as a whole, right? They simply are not partners in this. In fact, they are the obstruction. They are the reason why all these things haven't happened.
Watch me.
Exactly that.
Come
right?
back and start
So,
flipping
since
them.
we can't rely on them as a partner, right? And
Watch out, one
simply
side of
waiting
England
for these things to happen, right?
Everyone
Seems
cheating
unaccountable because
us.
there are lives lost. Why not put gun legislation in place that can help lessen these actual deaths that are happening now? Because those lives, right? Those people, those bullets don't wait around. They don't slow down. Oh, there's legislation might be coming down the pike. Poverty might be going down soon, right? So I won't go through this child. So I don't.
Okay, so one of my personal icons, who was a racist, by the way, is Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, he was a progressive Republican, and what he did, which I think people need to work up some fucking nutsack and do, is they need to bully their fucking political peers. Okay, so I'm perfectly comfortable bullying my political peers in order to push for policies that I believe in. Not only that, you have to start incrementally and small. All right. I talked to my local representative last week. We were talking about field social workers, which the Orlando Police Department is already doing. Orange County Sheriff's Office is not doing it. She asked me to make contact with the Orange County Sheriff's Office and see if I can bully the sheriff into doing it as a Republican, as a centrist, as a whatever, in order to get field social workers in the program, because she said that if I get the sheriff to agree to the program, which she's already approached him about multiple times, then she will pay for it through state funds. So I understand that when people are dying tomorrow, it's hard to want to focus on a 5 or 10 year solution. But what I'm saying is every single thing in a democracy is going to take 5 to 10 years, and we have to start now.
Agreed. Okay, so I will move on. We'll move on to the next subject. But I would just say the progressives had started decades ago, and who was in the way? Conservatives the entire time. Of course, right? Like it's not like we haven't been working for those exact prescriptions. That's been our project. That's been our goal. But
yeah,
once
but
again,
you suck at rhetoric. That's where I come in.
Or the conservatives suck at understanding that they are fighting against their own interests, right? Are easily demagogued against. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know, right? And once again, waiting for them to understand that that their interests are at odds with whatever their politicians or whatever fucking Trump is saying, right? Like while we're waiting for them to do that, right? To understand these simple concepts, people are dying.
This game?
So I don't know, but I guess
well, final point:
you're
a socialist, and I don't believe that socialism is in my personal interest. But we can work together on other stuff.
He's failing.
Okay, all right, okay. Next topic.